More than 1,000 years ago, the mountains of southwestern Ethiopia were covered with dense forest, where a small evergreen shrubs produced bright red cherries. For centuries, these cherries attracted birds and wild animals, but they held little importance for humans. Then came one history's most famous legends. The young goat herder named Kaldi noticed that these goats behaved strangely after eating berries from an unfamiliar plant. Instead of resting after a long day, they remained energetic, jumping across rocks and refusing to sleep. Curious Khalid tasted the berries himself and experienced the same burst of energy. Historians cannot confirm whether Khalid was a real person. His history appeared centuries after the event it supposedly describes. But one fact is beyond dispute. Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee arabica, the spices responsible for the most of the world's finest coffee. Long before coffee became a drink, local communities had already found practical uses for the plant. Hunters mixed crushed coffee's cherries with animal fat to create energy rich food for long journeys, while others chewed the leaves and brewed simple herbal infusions. The rich aroma and flavors were associated with coffee had not yet been discovered. According to legends, Khalid brought the mysterious berries to a nearby monastery. The monks were suspicious and threw them into the fire. Moments later, an irresistible aroma filled the room. Curious, they removed the roasted beans, grounded them, mixed them with the hot water, and unknowingly created the world's first cup of coffee. Whether his history is true or not, roasting transformed an ordinary forest berry into a beverage unlike any other. Coffee quickly became popular among religious communities because it helped monks stay awake during long nights of prayers and meditation. Soon, knowledge of the plant crossed the Red Sea in Yemen. That short journey changed history forever. Unlike Ethiopia, where coffee still grew wild, became the first country to cultivate it on a large scale. Its cool mountain climates and fertile volcanic soil proved it ideal for growing coffee, and farmers soon realized they possessed something incredible, valuable. By the 15th century, coffee had become deeply connected with Yemen Sufi Muslim communities. During long nights of worship, coffee helped worshippers remain alert without dulling the mind. The drink became known as kwa, a word that eventually evolved into the modern word coffee. Demand spread rapidly throughout the Middle East. At the center of this booming trade stood a small port city of Mocha. For nearly 200 years, almost every coffee bee traded internationally passed through this single harbor. Merchants from Egypt, Persia, India, and the Ottoman Empire filled its dock, turning Mocha into the coffee capital of the world. Even today, the world mocha survives in cafes everywhere, a reminder of the city that once controlled the global coffee trade. Yemen's rulers knew exactly how valuable coffee had become. If other nations learned to cultivate the plant, their monopoly would disappear. So they developed an indigenous strategy. Before export, coffee beans were either boiled or partially roasted, destroying their ability to germinate. Foreign merchants could drink the coffee, they could sell it, but they could never grow their own. For generations, the secret remained protected. At the same time, the coffee was transforming society into another unexpected way. Across Arabia, coffee houses began appearing in major cities. These were far more than place to drink. Merchants negotiated business deals, poets recited their latest work, scholars debated philosophy, travelers exchanged news from distant lands. Unlike travels, where alcohol often led to disorder, Coffee houses encouraged clear thinking and conversation. They became some of the history's first true public places where people from different backgrounds gathered to exchange ideas. Few realized it then, but these humble cafes were about to change politics, commerce, and culture forever. And when the almighty Ottoman Empire embraced coffee, its influence would have spread far beyond the Middle East. By the early 16th century, coffee had already become an essential part of life across Arabia, but its greatest journey was only beginning. At the time, the Ottoman Empire stretched across the three continents, controlling some of the busiest trade routes in the world. As merchants carried coffee not from Yemen, the drink quickly found a new home in cities like Cairo. Modern day Istanbul, what started as a beverage, soon became a cultural revolution. The Ottomans opened dedicated coffee houses known as khanveen. Unlike travels, these established were places of conversation rather than intoxication. Merchants negotiated business deals, scholars debated philosophy, poets recited their latest works, musicians entertained crowds, and travelers shared news from distant lands. Long before newspaper became common, coffee houses functioned as an information hubs. If a war had broken out, someone inside the cafe house already knew. If a war or a new trade opportunities appeared, merchants discussed it immediately. For this reason, coffee houses earned an remarkable nickname, the School of the Wise. They encouraged learning, discussions, and free exchange of ideas, and that made governments nervous. Ottoman rulers soon realized that wherever people gathered, political opinions spread. Citizens openly criticized taxes, questioned military campaigns, and even joked about the Sultan himself. Coffee was not merely keeping people awake, it was encouraging them to think. Several rulers tried to suppress this growing influence. Coffee houses were ordered to close, coffee beans were confiscated, in some periods, anyone caught operating the cafe faced several punishments. The most famous crackdown came under Sultan Murad IV in the 17th century. Determined to restore orders, he banned coffee, alcohol, and tobacco throughout the empire. According to historical accounts, Murad sometimes disguised himself as an ordinary citizen and walked through Istanbul at night searching for secret coffee houses. Those caught breaking the law could face harsh penalties. Yet, despite these efforts, coffee never disappeared. Many cafes continued operating behind closed doors while families brewed coffee privately in their homes. Eventually, the ban was abandoned. The lesson was clear. Once people embraced coffee, taking it away proved nearly impossible. While coffee flourished across the Ottoman Empire, European merchants and diplomats became fascinated by this mysterious black drink. Travelers returned from Istanbul described lively cafes filled with scholars, merchants, and artists discussing ideas late into the night. Curiosity spread quickly. By the early 17th century, ships loaded with coffee beans began arriving in Venetia, Europe's gateway to Eastern trade. At first, coffee was expensive and considered a luxury. Doctors even prescribed it as a medicine, claiming it could improve digestions, relieving headaches, and strengthen the body. But not everyone welcomed its arrival. Coffee came from the Islamic world, and many religious leaders viewed it with suspicion. Rumors spread that the strange dark beverage was dangerous, even sinful. Some called it the devil's drink. Controversy eventually reached Pope Clement, 8, who was asked to decide whether Christians could be forbidden from drinking coffee. Accordingly to a famous story, the Pope requested a cup before making his decision. After taking a sip, he reportedly enjoyed it so much that he declared it would be a shame to let only Muslims enjoy such a wonderful drink. Whether he actually spoke those words remain uncertain. What is certain is that the Catholic Church never banned coffee. That single decision removed the greatest obstacle to its spread across Europe. Within decades, coffee houses appeared in Venice, London, Paris, and Amsterdam. These cafes quickly became the intellectual centers of Europe. In London, people could spend an entire day inside a coffee house for the price of a single penny, earning them the nickname penny universities. Scientists, merchants, lawyers, sailors, inventors, and philosophers all gathered under one roof. Ideas that shaped the modern world were exchanged over cups of coffee. Some of today's most famous institutions even began inside these cafes. Lloyd's of London, one of the world's leading insurance markets, started as a coffee house where ship captains exchanged information about cargo and sea voyages. The early London Stock Exchange also grew from meeting held in coffee houses where merchants traded shares and investments. Coffee was not simply exchanging what people drank, it was changing how they did business, it was changing how they learned, and it was changing how they thought. Meanwhile, one major problem remained. Almost every year, coffee beans still came from Yemen. European demand was growing rapidly, but Yemen continued protecting its monopoly by exporting only beans that could no longer grow into plants. For ambitious colonial powers, this dependence was unacceptable. If they wanted unlimited coffee, they would have to grow it themselves, and that meant obtaining a lively coffee plant by an means necessary. In the coming decades, daring smugglers, determined explorers, and ambitious emperors would risk themselves to steal one of the world's most valuable plants. This success would transform coffee from a regional treasure into an truly global crop. By the late 17th century, Europe's appetite for coffee had become impossible to satisfy. Demand grew every year, but one obstacle remained. Yemen still controlled the world's coffee supply. Its rulers ensured that every exported bean was boiled or partially roasted, preventing foreign nations from planting their own coffee trees. As long as monopoly lasted, Europe would remain dependent on Yemen's merchants, but Europe's colonial power had no intention of accepting that forever. The first breakthrough came from the Dutch East India Company, one of the richest and the most powerful trading organizations in history. After years of searching, Dutch traders finally succeeded in obtaining a living coffee plant. Historians still debate exactly how it happened, whether through a bribery, secret negotiations, or outright smuggling. But one thing is certain, for the first time, a fertile coffee plant had escaped Yemen. The Dutch carefully transported it to the Amsterdam Botanical Garden, where scientists nurtured it and discovered that coffee could thrive outside Arabia. Soon afterwards, seedlings were shipped to the Dutch colony of Java in the present day Indonesia. The island's volcanic soil and tropical climates proved ideal for cultivation. Within a few decades, Java became one of the world's leading coffee producer. Even today, the word Java remains a popular nickname for coffee. Other European powers quickly realized they needed coffee plantations of their own. The French successfully introduced coffee to the Caribbean after naval officers Gabriela de Quillo transported fragile coffee seedlings across the Atlantic. During the difficult voyage, fresh water became dangerous scarce. Yet De Clo reportedly shared his own drinking water with the tiny plant to keep it alive. His determination paid off. That single surviving seedling became the ancestor of millions of coffee trees across the Caribbean and Central America. Then came the country that would change coffee forever, Brazil. According to one of the famous story, Portuguese officer Francisco de Melo was sent to French on a diplomatic mission. Officially, he was there to settle a border dispute. Secretly, he had another mission to obtain fertile coffee seeds. Legend states that he prepared to leave. The French governor's wife secretly hid coffee seeds inside a bouquet of flowers she presented to him. Whether every detail is true remains uncertain, but the result is undeniable. Coffee reached Brazil, and the world would never be the same. Brazil's climate proved almost perfect for coffee cultivation. Vast fertile land allowed plantation to expand on a scale never ever before. By the 19th century, Brazil had become the world's largest coffee producers, a position it still holds today. Its coffee exports generated enormous wealth, built railways, expanded ports, and helped transform the country's economy. But this prosperity came at a terrible human cost. The massive plantation depended heavily on the labor of enslaved Africans. Millions of men, women, and children were forced to clear forests, plant trees, harvest cherries, and process beans under brutal conditions. For many consumers in Europe and North America, coffee symbolized comfort and process. For those who grew it, it often represented hardship and exploitation. Coffee's history cannot be told honestly without acknowledging this painful chapter. While Brazil's dominated production, coffee was reshaping politics on the other side of the Atlantic. In Britain's American colonials, tea had long been the perfected drink. Everything changed in 1973 when Britain imposed new taxes on tea. Colonial resistance reached its peak during the Boston Tea Party when protesters dumped hundreds of chests of British tea into Boston Harbor. Tea quickly became associated with British rule. Coffee became the patriotic alternative. After the American Revolution, coffee replaced tea as the nation's favorite beverage, a habit that continues today. Coffee also became a faithful companion during the times of the war. During the American Civil War, Union soldiers received regular coffee rations while confronted troops struggled with severe shortages, often roasted corn or sweet potatoes as substitute. In the World War I, military commandos recognized that alert soldiers found more effectively. Large field kitchens prepared enormous quantities of coffee every day, giving exhausted troops warmth, energy, and a brief reminder of home. By World War II, instant coffee had transformed military logistics. Soldiers could prepare a hot drink almost everywhere by simply adding hot water. Millions of packets accomplished Allied forces across Europe, Asia, and the Pacific, making coffee an essential part of wartime life. After the war, coffee became a daily habit of millions of families. Then, in 1971, a small shop opened in Seattle Peak Place Market. Its name was Starbucks. Originally, it stood only roasted coffee beans and a brewing equipment, but in the 1980s, Howard visited Italy and was inspired by the lively espresso bars where people gathered to socially to socialize rather than simply drink coffee. He transformed Starbucks into a cafe experience, creating what he called the third place and welcoming spaces between home and the work. The idea revolutionized coffee culture. People became interested not only in drinking coffee, but also in its origin, roasting methods, and unique flavors. Specialty coffee soon spread across the world, encouraging consumers to appreciate beans from Ethiopia, Colombia, Brazil, and countless other regions. Today, coffee supports the livelihood of more than 125 million people, and over 2 billion cups are consumed every single day. Yet, coffee faces new challenges. Climate change, rising temperature, plant diseases, and unpredictable weather threaten many traditional coffee growing regions. Scientists are developing more resilient coffee varieties, while farmers experiment with sustainable growing methods to protect both the crop and the environment. The future of coffee depends on balancing quality, sustainability, and the livelihood of millions of people who grow it. The next time you hold a cup of coffee, remember that you are holding far more than a drink. You are tasting a short story that began in the forest of Ethiopia, crossed the Red Sea with monks and merchants, survived royal bans, inspired philosophers and revolutionaries, traveled the world through daring acts of smuggling, built empires, fueled wars, and connected cultures across every continent. Few discoveries have shaped human history so quietly and so profoundly. From the forgotten wild berry to one of the world's most beloved drink, coffee journey is far from over. Its story continues with every cup we brew. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit a like button.